Good morning, everybody. We are excited to be here today as part of the I Am Remarkable week. I Am Remarkable is a Google initiative that empowers everyone, particularly women and other represented groups, to celebrate their achievements, both in the workplace and beyond the workplace. To date, it has reached 150,000 participants, and that is across 140 countries and over 800 companies, which is in itself truly remarkable. This is the first global I Am Remarkable week, and it's here to really emphasize the power of workplace diversity and allyship, while at the same time encouraging everybody to celebrate their own achievements. It's a digital experience, and it's featuring 15 virtual talks and panels and hundreds of I Am Remarkable workshops and a number of confidence-boosting challenges. So if anybody, companies or individuals would like to find out more, it's simple. You just Google I Am Remarkable. So we are going to kick it off now, and today we are really fortunate. We are joined here by a wonderful panel of YouTube creators, Rowan and Riyadh, and rather than me introducing them, I'm going to ask them to tell us a little bit about who they are, and also both of you, if you just can give us a few sentences on what makes you remarkable. And then I will kick it off with a few more questions. So over to you. I'll start with Rowan. Ladies first.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Rowan Ellis. I create video essays on YouTube around LGBTQ+ history, representation and pop culture. I also co-host the Queer Movie podcast. We've been running weekly watch-alongs to queer movies and LGBTQ+ cinema through lockdown. I also co-run the Ruckus Collective with Chris Giacuma, which is an events organisation that runs retreats and courses for emerging creatives that emphasises art and creativity and professional development for marginalised creators. And I also have a full-time job at Penguin Random House, where I look after Penguin Platform, which is our online and events outreach for teen readers.
Riyadh, do you want to go next? Just say a few words about who you are, and maybe just a few things on why you are remarkable, and then we'll jump into the questions.
Hello, my name's Riyadh Khalaf. I am a YouTuber that started on the platform way back in about 2007, 2008. So it was back in the early days of dial-up internet, and I have made in that time so many different types of content: comedy content, cooking content, and most recently documentary. I was one of YouTube's Creator for Change ambassadors, and through that program I went to Swaziland and filmed a documentary about their historic and somewhat illegal first ever Pride March, which was an incredible opportunity. On the side of YouTube, I'm an author, wrote a book specifically for young gay boys, and sort of giving them tips on how to live a full and authentic life. And I also present some programs for the BBC, both on radio and on TV, BBC Radio 1 and The One Show. And most recently, I am this year's winner of Celebrity MasterChef, which was unbelievable. Not that I won it, but the experience. I'm not saying I'm unbelievable. Well, I guess I can. It's I Am Remarkable week. And if I'm thinking about what makes me remarkable, I think it is the fact that I use my own past trauma of bullying and being othered, both in school and the workplace, to try and turn that into a good thing and use that experience to help the next generation of young queer people who are coming up both online and offline, and sort of put some good in the world.
Thank you both. You both have impressive achievements, both personally and professionally. So thank you again for joining us. And Riyadh, I'm going to direct the first question to you. You talk a lot about allyship, especially from your father. And I thought it'd be great to hear a little bit more about your journey, how difficult it was to ask him for his support, and the support that you're getting from him today. And then also how you turn this into a topic for YouTube.
So yeah, my journey has been an interesting one over the years. It's I knew that I was a young gay man from about the age of 12 or 13, but didn't tell anyone until I was about 16. So that they were sort of the 4 years of shame and fear that I, went through as a young guy, trying to sort of cloak who I was, trying to figure out if I could change who I was, sort of self-conversion therapy in a way. And, none of that would work no matter how much I wanted it to. And might I just add, now as an out proud and happy person, many years on, I wouldn't change it for the world. I love my identity. But after I came out to my parents, I sort of came out online as well, I just sort of started talking about LGBT themes and expected my audience to come along on that journey with me. But there was still a big question about, how did your parents accept you? How did you win them over, if you will? Because I'm half Iraqi, half Irish, and it's sort of a cultural difference in my house between mom and dad. And so we made a video, just in hindsight and retrospectively, talking about what that experience was like for all three of us. And in that video, my dad was unbelievably honest and open about his struggles, accepting the fact that I was gay and that he, contemplated potentially even taking his own life because he couldn't see any way out of his own shame. And this was something that we never really knew until he brought it up in the video. And so he's an incredibly strong man, and he shared his story in order to inspire other parents who are watching these YouTube videos to, put their shame to one side, take a breath, take a step back, reevaluate the love for their offspring, and come back, as a sort of a calm-minded person. And so now he is an active ally. He's an activist, I would even say. He goes on TV and radio and promotes all sorts of queer rights. He wrote a chapter in my book aimed at other parents of young LGBT people, and he's my hero. So, but YouTube was very, very much a key tool in us articulating our journey and having a purpose in terms of not just living with the pain that we had been through together, but like I said at the top of the broadcast, using the pain as an experience to help others.
That's an amazing and very touching story, Riyadh. And I guess my quick follow-on question would be, and I presume you've had plenty of chances to discuss this with your dad since, but how did he make his own journey, right? Because that's must have been a difficult journey for him as well. And I'd love just to hear what was the key in that. I presume his love for you in the end was probably the key thing that helped him through the journey. But it'd be great if you could just tell us a bit more about it.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And it's something that I'm still sort of learning as I psychologically pick apart all of the things that we did. I think overall, my dad is a very, very sensitive man who has an overriding love and affection for his family. He fled Iraq as a refugee to get away from Saddam Hussein's regime. So he understands what it's like to go through adversity and come out the other side. It's sort of a learned pathway that he's been through. So I think my mother was sort of the main influence in his change from shameful homophobe to loving father of a gay son. She went to him a few weeks after I came out when he was really struggling, and she said, "Sam, this is your choice. It's me and the boys in your life, or you're on your own. And she said to him, she gave him an ultimatum and basically said, who is it that's going to be by your bedside on, you know, when you're dying, holding your hand, kissing you and telling you that they loved you? It's going to be your two boys. So no one else's opinion matters. None of the other extended family who don't love and appreciate Riyadh, none of them matter. So he had a light bulb moment. And
Wow.
it was pretty quick, actually, pretty quick. And soon after that, all three of us decided to let go of my mother's Catholicism, my father's Muslim faith, and we became humanist or atheist. And our lives have never been better since doing that, really.
Amazing. And I'll just say one last thing and then I'll turn to you, Rowan. What's a real shame is that there isn't space in religions, right, for, you know, these possibilities and these conversations. And I can only hope that over time, religions will allow for that space to come in. So that's a side note.
I'll just add something very quickly there. Is I made a documentary series for the BBC called Queer Britain, and in one of the episodes I examined sort of queerness and being a faith-led person, and are they compatible? And you're right, 90% of the time it's a no, but there are certain faith groups in every denomination that welcome and embrace their LGBT members. They can be hard to find, but they do exist. And from the people that I spoke to, it brings them such warmth and contentment to know that they're not fully cast out, that there is a sort of a small sect within that group that love them. So
I think the Catholic Church is slowly getting there. There's certainly this new Pope is making an effort to be more inclusive. So hopefully there's light there. So Rowan, let me just turn it over to you. And thank you, Riyadh, for sharing. It was incredibly touching and powerful. So Rowan, you talked about your identity and how it shifted over the years, how it was not a linear process. I think at one point you even talk about mass confusion. I think it's something I've heard you talk about in some of your videos. How did you discover and learn to love and understand your own voice, despite the many contradictory voices that exist out there? So if you could tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I mean, I've always been quite an opinionated, loud person, I think is the nice way of putting it. I found some of my old school reports a few years ago in the attic, and it was like, even in year 2, like, Rowan has a lot of thoughts and she likes to voice them, sort of polite way of being like, Rowan won't shut up. And from a very young age, those thoughts and opinions have been quite embedded into things like beliefs and philosophy and morality and all of that kind of stuff. I was raised by my parents very openly. They're not religious, but it was never a question of like, you also can't be religious. There was a lot of kind of encouragement to investigate different belief systems. But I similarly, from a very early age, was an atheist and kind of had a so my morals didn't end up coming from a particular external teaching, but from my own understanding of the world. And so from very early on, I was very for queer rights, without ever having realized that I was like part of that category. It was just a thing that I felt a kind of morally obvious to me, that equality was something that you should support. And I think that for me has been really a powerful influence over my voice, knowing that I have this innate sense of justice within me that isn't based on anything externally telling me that that's what I should think, and also isn't based on me realizing my sexuality and then being like, I guess I should be for equal rights then. And I think that always has been something that I'm aware that if I had potentially been raised in a different household or had been exposed to more kind of discriminatory views as a young person could have been completely different. I don't think that it's necessarily anything innately remarkable within myself. I think it's a happy accident of being raised in the household that I was, with people who are very open. And so I think that learning to love your voice ultimately comes from a sense of authenticity and like honesty and truth in terms of what you genuinely think and how you can try and separate that from the voices of other people around you that are wanting you to believe a certain thing or think a certain way or express yourself in a certain way. So for me, yeah, learning to love your voice comes from learning to accept like your authentic truth and who you are internally and who you are within relation to your identity, your experiences, which can be difficult, right? Like it is sometimes tough, especially if you're in an environment which is different or saying that what you're believing is not right or isn't true. But I think ultimately you can't truly love a voice that you're using that isn't your own. So yeah, authenticity, I think, and finding that within yourself can be a journey, but once you have it, that's how you truly learn to love what you're saying and what you're believing.
So that's interesting. So it sounds as if you grew up in an environment that gave you a lot of space to become who you are, and therefore that maybe made the journey a little bit easier, right? Because you had built up your identity and your confidence from a very young age, right? Because your family and your general environment gave you the space to do so.
Yeah, my parents aren't like activists or super and stuff. It's much more mellow. But my dad has worked in the arts all his life, and he has been around like queer people all his life. And I remember asking him about it because we'd talk about the fact that he's, you know, like a 60-something-year-old man from kind of a very outwardly conservative town in Yorkshire. And so it would completely make sense for him to have had homophobic views in that kind of very simplistic view of who he is and his origins. But he has, like, my older brother is gay, and my father's always been accepting of him and supportive of him and of me as well. And it wasn't until talking to him and kind of finding out how much influence queer people had on his life when he moved to London, and asking him, like, well, it's so strange because the people that I know in your life who you're friends with are all the parents of my friends, so they're all a lot of straight people. And he had to be like, well, the 80s happened, like the AIDS crisis happened, all my friends are dead. Like that's the reason why we've not really talked about it, and you didn't necessarily have a lot of gay people in your life when you were younger, and it's because of this part of like our history as a queer community that was something that happened. And so he's never been like super open and talking about it, but when I've had conversations with him, I think those realizations of like actually knowing people and actually having the time to have genuine friendships with people, I think is what allows people to open up and be more accepting and be more kind of understanding of different people, is that kind of experience of being able to see someone's authentic self and truth and let that in and be open, to that kind of difference.
Yeah, I think that's right. Thank you, Rowan, for sharing. So Riyadh, I'll just go back to you for a minute. So you've spoken before about the struggles of being a social chameleon and feeling you had to alter your character and your personality to fit other people's expectations of you. And, you know, why it's a big issue in the LGBTQ community. So I presume you finally found your voice now. It strikes me that you have. And so can you talk a little bit about that, and also how YouTube's played a role in that journey?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it's something that constantly goes through my head, where I ask, am I being myself? Am I really truly being myself? By the way, sorry, there's carpentry work going on outside of my building. This is what it's like when we broadcast from home, eh? I'll speak louder though. Yeah, what I mean by social chameleon is that when you grow up in a world where you're constantly having to edit and contort yourself physically, your voice, what your interests are, who your friends are, to avoid attack from bullies or from even a family member, it makes you a master of disguise. It makes you understand that there are certain situations where you must be a different way, but you kind of do it in a hyper sense where it's more than the everyday person would. So I've realized that in my professional and personal life, I will evaluate a space that I'm about to enter, be it a house party or a television studio, and I'll make myself into the person that I know they want me to be, rather than just being. And initially, I found a lot of strength in that. Like, look at me, I can become the product that everyone wants me to be, and it's going to lead to such success in my life, and this is a skill. But actually, I've now realized that it's damaging, because I have had to do a lot of soul searching to find, well, you've done 2.5 decades of faking it. Who are you actually? And it can be quite sad or scary when you look at yourself in the mirror and you don't know who that is. So through therapy and talking with my partner and my parents, I feel like I'm getting there. But even me, as someone who's almost 30, it's not a journey that's over, and it may never end. I'll probably always be finding out little traits of myself, little fragments of my being that were deleted or intentionally left behind in my teenage years or childhood, that I'm trying to claw back. And I'm not being over dramatic here. This is, genuinely, how it is for a lot of LGBT people. But, like I said with the other stuff, Cecile, I try to, as best I can, pick the good from the bad and use that either to my own benefit or to benefit other people. So I think YouTube has definitely sped up the process of me honing in on who Riyadh really is by simply motivating me and celebrating authenticity. When I put a video up on YouTube, I know it'll perform so much better metrics-wise if I am an unpolished, raw, unfiltered version of myself. And it's that sort of process, and even the technical process of editing yourself, having to listen to yourself for hours on end as you create a piece of content, forces you to listen to yourself back, question if this is actually you, and then strip away all of the crap that isn't legitimate and leave the real self at the center.
And Riyadh, I presume also your audience, of course, gives you feedback and helps to give you that confidence, right? To reinforce the authenticity. And that must be empowering, I assume, or I hope.
Yeah, I call my journey on YouTube as becoming an accidental advocate. I went on just looking to have a bit of fun and to express some creativity in a world where I was, like I said, being contained and contorted by, society. And very quickly I realized that speaking openly as a young gay man was inspiring to people, because there are millions of, people like myself and Rowan who watch these videos that aren't in a place where they can be like that. And when I began to get these messages from these young people saying, we want more content. I love when you, talk about this issue. I love that you, have the voice that you do, and you're not, pretending to be someone else. And so when you hear that there's something bigger than yourself that's being affected by the content that you're making, it becomes kind of an exciting and a little bit scary obligation. Um, but like it's very motivating to get those comments from your audience and to know that they just want you. They don't want anything else. They just want you.
So you're both incredible role models, and you help, to your point, Rowan, you help hundreds and thousands of others with a sense of belonging. And Rowan, I believe that growing up, you did not necessarily have a queer role model, other than maybe some of the older girls in high school, the cool girls who, had come out, were happy. But I guess my question to you is, how important do you think it is today to have those role models? And if we don't have them readily available, what advice would you give?
I mean, I can confirm there were no girls at my school who had already come out. Like, this was this was in the early 2000s. There were none of them. And that was not unusual. There was a school in my area, my brother's school actually, where people would wait until the results day when they knew they would never have to go back in the building, and then they would come out. Like, it was very much not a fun utopia of high school where the cool girls were lesbians. Like, not at all. And that was also I was bullied relentlessly at school, because of homophobia from the age of about 12, and I think it was just because it was kind of like a righteous anger and indignance of like me knowing that was wrong and being like, that's not, like, being gay isn't an insult. Before I knew that I was gay, I felt like I was kind of sticking up for other people when I was getting angry at people for thinking that calling me gay was an insult and that homophobic bullying was acceptable. I was like, think about all of those people who might hear you say that to me and they're gay. Think about how they would feel. And then it wasn't until later that I was like, oh wait, they were right. I do think role models are it's interesting because I think that there is a sort of positive way of thinking about role models and a maybe more tricky way. I think that with the rise of like parasocial relationships, there is a danger of thinking that the totality of a person who is in the public eye and attaching role model status to them as if you understand like every part of their internal self and their motivations and their life, and that all of that is something to be emulated. I think it's a lot healthier to have an element of their public persona or what they have achieved. So, whether they're a sports person or an actress or a writer, that you can say, this is something that I respect, or this is something that I would like to emulate, whether it is the hard work or determination or their creativity or something like that. And I think with YouTube, what is potentially difficult is that it starts to blur the line when you have people who talk a lot about their personal life and do, vlogging and daily vlogs and things like that, that there is a worry that people can imagine that they know exactly who that person is and that they feel like the entirety of their life is open to role model status, which I don't necessarily think is healthy on either end. I don't think it's healthy to have that much faith in someone that you don't know, or even, someone that you do, that you see them as being beyond reproach or kind of perfect. But I also think it's difficult for the people who are put in that position and put on a pedestal to feel like they can't make a mistake or they can't grow or learn because someone sees them as perfect and sees them as the thing that they should be aspiring to be. So I wouldn't necessarily want to see myself as a role model. In the whole of my being, I think that people seeing the fact that I'm very open about my sexuality and wanting to feel like they have the confidence and the power to do that in their own life, completely love that, top notch. But in terms of feeling like, oh, Rowan, this person that I see on YouTube is a really amazing person and she's a good and moral person and I want to be exactly like her. You don't know me. I don't know you. Like, I think that that's a really important element of parasocial relationships that we should be wary of when we talk about role models, especially in relation to YouTube.
That's very thoughtful, Rowan. Thank you. I suppose so. Your advice would be to be really clear about which aspects of somebody's achievements makes them a role model for you, right? So to just be, again, sort of very thoughtful about what it is that they have done or that they stand for, as opposed to taking the whole thing for granted.
Yeah, and I think that can actually be a really powerful thing when you break down what is it that I actually like about them. Like if you're looking at a sports person, for example, it's often not that they're good at sport, which is not necessarily something you can emulate. It's that they work hard, or that they are a good sports person, like very humble, that they support their teammates, that they use their platform for good when they have any kind of platform. Like those specific elements of someone, if you break down what you actually respect about them, it becomes something that you can say, oh wait, I can do that in my own life. It's not that I have to be an Olympic level athlete, but I have these very particular elements that I respect in someone. And I think that's much more empowering, at least to me, than just seeing the whole of a person as being someone to put on a pedestal.
Yeah, I think that's very true. Thank you. So Riyadh, in your book, you give advice to parents about how they can create this open and safe environment for their LGBTQ plus child to grow up without any fear of rejection. So can you share with us today some of the key tips that you think are important?
Yeah, it's funny because when I wrote it in the book, I initially wrote these tips as something for a parent of an LGBT plus child, but actually, as time has gone on, I kind of think that they're a great thing for any parent of any child to take on, to employ. I think number one, first and foremost, is make sure that all language used in the house never ever diminishes the importance of all people, all bodies. That, you know, if an LGBTQ plus person appears on the television, that you are very much celebrating them, not using their gender identity or sexuality or whatever as a reason to make fun of them, because those small throwaway comments can stick. And if your child does happen to be LGBTQ plus, that one comment could render them incapable of coming out for who knows how long, for fear of what you might say to them. And the last thing, you know, a kid wants is for their parent to become a bully. So make sure you sort of watch your language. Don't police yourself, but just be conscious day to day that the things that you're saying have a real impact. I think widen your friendship network if you can. You know, if I spoke to parents recently who had a feeling that one of their kids might come out as LGBTQ plus, and they came to me for advice, and they said, "What can we do?" And I said, "Well, do you have any people in your immediate circle who might be like them, you know, might be part of the community?" And they said, "Oh, well, my brother is gay, and you know, a friend of a friend is a lesbian." I was like, "Well, get them over, you know, when coronavirus is gone, for a dinner party or whatever. You know, introduce your kid to this person and speak about this person in a celebrated way. That look at the achievements that they've done and look at their same-sex partner. Isn't it great? You're not outing your kid. You're just exposing your child to an example of someone who might be like them, that is surviving and thriving and doing all the things that their kid might want to do in the future." Because I think a lot of young people of our identities feel that that identity will render them incapable of having the dreams that they want professionally, incapable of being loved or loving, and many other things. So having that example, you know, speaking of role models, that, you know, that is a living, breathing version in the real world, and that's not online. And I think as well, if your child comes to you and you know, says, "I'm trans," or "I'm non-binary," or whatever they say to you, and it hurts and it feels weird and it stings, that's okay. You know, you likely had an image in your head of what your child was going to be and who they were going to be married to, and what gender they were going to be. But I would say take a step back, take a breath, Don't say anything in the heat of the moment that is likely to damage your child and hurt your child, because what you're feeling right now likely isn't how you're going to feel in a week or 2 weeks or 6 months. So embrace them, give them a hug, tell them, you know, I love you, I'll always love you, that will never change. I just need some time to process this, but you know, I'll be back in a minute. And in that time, educate yourself, immerse yourself in the amazing community that your child is now part of, and get excited about that journey of, you know, going to pride marches, going to protests, traveling the world with your child, meeting, you know, wonderful people as my parents have with me, that this is actually, if anything, a blessing and a gift, that you have been chosen, wonderful parent, to have this glowing child that's part of a minority. Lucky you. It's a shift in how you see it, and it can go from something that's full of doom and dread and fear to something that's full of excitement and joy. There's many more tips, but they're the kind of core ones, I say.
No, those are some great ones. It's a journey of discovery, right? And there's a lot of richness. You have to embrace the richness that is in that journey, like many journeys. Yes, thank you.
Absolutely.
Rowan, can you share some tips with our audience on how to focus on your own voice and the path one wants to take, instead of maybe being consumed by what other people may or may not say?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard because everyone's difficulties with that are so distinct and so individual in terms of their environment and what's going on around them. But I think in general, it's always useful to like find your people, find whether that's in person, in school, or in work, or you know, social clubs or meetups or online even. There will be people who value what you have to say and who you can see value in return, who will support you, but like also feel comfortable calling you out or calling you in and saying like, hey, maybe that thing that you said or that you're expressing, let's talk about that, let's unpack that, and won't let you get away with things that aren't right. And I think that that's equally as important as people who are going to support you. Because I think that for a lot of people, there is like a fight to be had and there's stuff that they want to stick up for, and that's something that is within their voice, but it doesn't necessarily have to be like that. And I think that finding a voice that doesn't come from an inherently oppositional place, a defensive place that's like, screw you to people who doubt me, and you know, people who are going to hate me, this is the voice that I have to have. If I'm going to have people who hate who I am, then I have to be the person who is in combat with those people who are, you know, discriminatory or something like that. But for a lot of people, actually freeing you from that circumstance and having a voice that is not dictated by oppression or anger can also be really powerful. So I think that there's not one kind of LGBT voice. You don't have to be the person who's with the megaphone at the protests directly confronting homophobia, for example. There can be a lot of power in the voice of someone who talks about your experiences in a really happy, loving relationship, and being someone that discusses that, like the beauty in that, like Riyadh said, of things that are really, you know, joyful and powerful and comforting around being queer. So yeah, figuring out not just what you think you should be doing from our point of view as like a queer person, but as a person in general, whatever identity or experiences you have, and looking more at like what you want to say and what you want to focus your energy on is really important.
Thank you. And I would say, I think it's true in general, I'd make happy choices.
Yeah, make the choices that are going, I don't even know if happy is the right word for it, because I think that there will be people who find and satisfaction isn't either, but fulfillment, I guess, in some way, from what you're doing, because I think it's not necessarily happy to have to be the person who's talking about the difficulties and the hardships and the fact that there are like countries in the world where you can be killed for being gay. Like, I don't necessarily feel like people who are activists for that are feeling happy about their work, but they feel like they're
fulfilled, yes,
empowered or fulfilled or doing something that's important. And I think, finding that element of positivity is important.
But fulfillment should lead to some form of happiness, right?
Mm-hmm.
You would think, you would hope. Well, thank you both. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand it over to the audience, because we have a few questions from the audience. I want to make sure we have a chance to address them. So the first one is for you, Riyadh. I will read it out. What a story, Riyadh. Your father seems to have become a great support. How has it been with your extended family from your dad's side, and how have both of you handled it?
A very interesting question. I'm trying to find a politically correct way to answer it. There was some heat, let's call it heat, from a couple of members of my family on my dad's side, and a bit of back and forth about, my father standing by me, his son, and saying, we're not going to try and convert Riyadh. We're not going to cast him out. We're not going to do any of that. He is what he is, and if you don't accept him, then that's that. And it ended up with essentially us cutting off communication with part of my dad's side of the family, not all of it, just part of it. And it's actually been bizarrely, it's been a very, very enlightening and joy-filled process, because this person was actually quite toxic and had some sort of unhealthy ideas of what should be done with me and to me to make me better, to fix me. So they're gone. And then with the extended family who are actually still in Iraq, our belief is that they probably know, but they just don't talk about it. And I'm so fine with that. I have a distant relationship with them. I met them once when I was 4 years old. But there's still, I guess, a familial love there of sorts, and I want the best for them. But I honestly, I don't think they care. It's not in their world. It's not in their life. So we let them live. They let us live, and we've sort of, I think, found an equilibrium. So we're all good.
Thank you. So this next question, Rowan, maybe you can start with it. I think you can both give your own insights to it. What specific ideas and daily rituals, practices would you suggest to someone whose early childhood or background didn't give them a chance to find their own voice, to discover that for themselves once they're in adulthood? That's very, very big question.
Big question, really interesting. So I think that if you are an adult now, you are not a blank slate. You will have had your experiences, the culture that you're in will all have created the person that you are. And you, will probably never be able to escape elements of that, but there are ways in which you can start to question, okay, how much of this is stuff that I have just internalized because it's what I've been told is true, or what I've been told is what I should be thinking or doing, and how much of this is because it's actually coming from my innate sense of self and my innate sense of what I want to be doing. And so what that looks like will be very individual to you. That might be journaling, that might be meditation, that might be kind of sitting with yourself. It might be in group discussions and having conversations with people that you care about. I think that there's often these layers of pretense that happen in daily conversations that you can start to strip away until you can be completely honest and talk about things and not feel like there's going to be a sense of judgment, and finding someone that you can talk to about that can be really helpful. therapy obviously is a version of that. And also looking aspirationally at like where you want to be, how you want to think, what you want to believe, what you want to about yourself and about the world. So I think it's less a case that there's like one particular activity that everyone who has their own kind of feels like they're in touch with their own voice does every morning, and that's what you need to be doing. I think it's looking at how you best process the world, whether it is through writing or through discussing or through contemplating privately, and figuring out how you separate things. I heard something, I wish I remember who said it, but the idea is like your first initial reaction to something is the reaction that has been kind of imparted onto you by whatever culture and external forces you're in, or the society that you've grown up in. And it's when you then stop and think that your next reaction is what you actually believe. And I think that speaks to what Riyadh was talking about in terms of, you know, if you have a queer child who comes out to you, that initial shock reaction is a reaction that society has placed upon you of, oh, this is what should I be thinking? How should I be acting? And it's that moment of stepping back and saying, okay, let me actually think about this and what I think about this, not what I've been told I should be thinking about it. That's really the important thing. So it will probably take time, and I think might end up being a mixture of different things that help, but it is definitely possible. And I think the fact that there is an awareness of, I want to find this thing, I want to understand who I am and what my voice is, and I understand that I've been affected by things throughout my life that have potentially impacted that or dampened it, is a really great first step to understanding where you want to kind of be in the future with it.
Rowan, would you also say that sometimes maybe, and something Riyadh said earlier, having maybe a broader group of communities and sort of broadening the groups of people you interact with, bringing different kinds of people and communities into your life, again, as a way to discover other parts of yourself that maybe not so obvious because of where you grew up and how you grew up. Maybe something else to think about. I don't know, Riyadh, what your view might be.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think in a personal sense, I have lived in a very white Irish sort of bubble for most of my life, and I moved to the UK 5 years ago, and London is so much more diverse in many forms, not just, you know, the color of people's skin, but also their identities on the queer spectrum. I never knew any pansexual people, any non-binary people when I lived in Dublin. So I think what I've actively done over the last few years is try to sort of expand my friendship group, expand the ideas that I'm pitching to television channels that I want to explore, just expand. And it's sort of enriched my life and helped me realize that my struggles are my struggles, and other people's are, you know, can be so much different to mine. You know, if you find yourself as a double or a triple minority, let's say, you know, that would be a completely different situation to what I've had to go through. And it's really informed a lot of my work, actually, in terms of, you know, when I interview someone who's never been on camera before, who has had a transphobic parent and a racist teacher and issues in an abusive relationship, it's like, whoa, okay, there's a lot to unpack here, but I'm actively taking it all in a respectful way, and only, you know, covering the stuff that you're comfortable talking about, and there's, you know, all of this trauma wrapped up in it. So yeah, it's something that I recommend as well to a lot of my friends who are kind of very comfortable, let's say, just hanging out with their white gay friends and their white gay club, and just sort of reminding them that there's a whole world out there full of people that are actually, you know, that they really should be reaching out to.
And I think also, like, just if I can just add to that, the way that the internet works, of the algorithms and the people that you follow, who follow particular people means that if you aren't making a conscious effort to expand the input that you're having, you can end up being trapped inside this very particular bubble of people who look like you or think like you. And it is really useful to be able to actively step out of that and say, okay, how many other voices do I need to be looking at? I think that that's like the nature of privilege, right? That you don't necessarily see it, that you don't understand the ease at which you move through the world, because you, by like the nature of privilege, you aren't aware of it and you have to work on that. And so I think looking at not just the people who are within your immediate friendship groups, but like what you are following online, who you are following online, what you're reading, what kind of authors you have in your life, what you are consuming in terms of media, can be really useful. And also I think there's a sense sometimes that you have to be very certain of things, that, you know, you have to know what letter on the LGBT spectrum you are before you are allowed to have input. You need to be certain of, and I think that that's kind of damaging, right? Like everyone's on a process of a journey, and if the only time that you're allowed to have input or have an opinion is when you've reached your destination, like that's just seems ridiculous to me. I think it's really important to leave space for people who are questioning or unsure, or including people who are straight or cis, who are confused or don't understand, or, you know, have questions. I think I really appreciate the idea of a safe space not being somewhere where people have to be very say the right thing all the time, but where people feel able to ask questions and it's not taken in bad faith, and you can give answers to people who they don't know because they're, you know, they grew up in a town where there weren't any openly gay people, where it was frowned upon, and they want to learn, but they are using the wrong words and they're nervous to ask questions because they don't want to offend anyone. Like, actually, that's exactly the kind of person that you want to have a conversation with, who's really well-meaning and like genuinely trying to be a good person, but just is messing up on the smallest things. And I think that's something that's super important when we're talking about creating space for people online and opening up your networks of both people who are having different experiences to you as a marginalized person, but also people who don't quite know what the right thing is to say, or like how they can engage with the community, but are very well-meaning and like want to engage in it. And I think it kind of, yeah, that goes both ways. And I'm always like so happy to answer questions and see people in the comments of my videos who are like, I've never thought about that before. That's so interesting. Oh, I never didn't even contemplate the fact that that's something that queer people went through. And I think can be equally as powerful.
Yes, right. Tolerance, right? Tolerance across the board is super important. I'm going to have one last question, and I think then we'll need to wrap up because we're almost at time. So just sort of really, really quickly, both of you, when you started your YouTube channel, did you have a specific audience you wanted to reach? And has that audience changed over time, over the years of your YouTube career? So maybe Riyadh, do you want to start, and then Rowan, you'll wrap us up.
I think when I started YouTube, it was a very sort of selfish activity. In school, I was like very quiet and keep myself to myself and don't, you know, bother anyone, just for fear of being bullied anymore. And so YouTube was really just a place for me to talk to a pretend person in internet land, because I didn't really understand what was, you know, going out there and if people actually would find it and watch it. And then when an audience started to come in, I was just happy that anyone was watching. It didn't matter who they were. Just the human being with eyeballs was consuming the thing that took me 3 days to create on Windows Movie Maker on a crappy webcam. I was like, woohoo, I'm famous. And then as time went on, I think just accidentally by default, people with similar stories gravitate to one another. And I find my audience now are very much of a similar age to me. They've got similar interests in terms of, you know, being nerdy about aviation or Titanic or whatever, and happen to be queer. Yeah, so it's they're all very, very, yeah, like me. You know, I sometimes in the past I had done these. I don't really like doing them anymore. Meet and greets at YouTube conventions, where you stand there for 3 hours meeting hundreds of people that enjoy your videos or have been moved by your work. It's great for the ego, but it's weird. And what I've noticed about that is you'll have one line which will be yours, and then you look to the right and it will be maybe a beauty blogger, and they'll have a line, and then it'll be like a science YouTuber. And if you look down, all of the people that are lined up are in a way just like the person that they've come to meet. So we had all of these people. I'm not here to stereotype, but a lot of the people in the science group had glasses on, and you know, were quite well dressed and they looked smart, if you can kind of put a look on that. And my group were covered in rainbows, and were covered in you know, bi flags and trans flags, and had sort of creative, colorful looks. And then the beauty people had, you know, full faces on, lashes, the whole lot. So it was a really amazing sort of microcosm of the YouTube world right there in front of me, where you see that you literally do attract like-minded people, and they see you as, I don't know, whatever they see you as. But it was a lovely moment.
So I when I was first making videos, I basically just finished my master's degree and was like, wow, I'm a nerd. I really want to keep doing essays, but I don't want to have to do a bibliography, because that's, as everyone knows, the worst part of doing essays is having to cite all of your individual page references and all this stuff. It's much easier to just shove them in the description of your YouTube video of like, if you're interested, I guess, check out these books. So I didn't necessarily have a particular audience in mind. And I guess I kind of still don't. I kind of make what I think is interesting and what I want to make. And I think that people will come to that with, you know, for whatever reason, whether it's because they are queer too, or because they're interested in film theory or history or things like that. I went to and I think with regards to what Riyadh just said around meet and greet stuff, I think that it's probably true that some of the people who are in the line for the beauty guru watch the science videos, or some of the people in the line for Riyadh watch the beauty videos. But I think that the reason why they chose to line up in that particular line is because there is something about that particular person's content that really resonates with them, where it's like, I can have varied interests and watch like comedy channels and nature documentary channels and all that stuff, but actually the person that I really want to talk to and find out about, or tell them that their content means something to me, is the person who has this particular element of it fundamentally, whether that is the beauty guru who gave me confidence, or the science YouTuber who made physics sound really cool to me and inspired me to go to university for it. Like that, there will be someone who has this particular effect on you. And often that will be someone who you align with in terms of your kind of core interests or identity. But I went to actually for my day job, went to one of the climate marches, to kind of talk to young people for my job at Penguin. And a few people recognized, I was like, if I'm ever going to get recognized out in the wild, it's going to be at a young person's climate activist march, to be fair. So I was like, oh, fair enough. And this guy came up to me and he was like, I really want to thank you, because I was part of the alt-right. Like, I was very much in the throes of very extreme right-wing propaganda. And he was like 16, 17 years old. And he was like, it was watching your channel and like ContraPoint's channel and a few other people's that made me realize actually what like nonsense it was that I thought. And he was like, I'm so ashamed of what I used to think. And I had to say to him, like, well, don't, like, you've come through the other side. You were like a child who was believing what he was seeing, who was being specifically fed things deliberately in a way that was going to make you want to believe those things. And so for you as such a young person to have managed to claw your way out of that way of thinking and find something that's more accepting is like really amazing. And I think that, like, I'd never thought of myself as being someone who was specifically making content to, you know, help people who maybe had much more homophobic views or much more kind of extreme right-wing views. But sometimes that is just the consequence of making something where you are your authentic self, and you can be a living example of, like, gay people not being evil, or, you know, women being as equal as anyone else. And so, yeah, I think that potentially not having a very specific audience in mind and being more open to different people coming in and learning and not necessarily all thinking the same thing has probably ended up having much more of an impact in my work than if I had specifically only wanted to target LGBT people. But I'm never like kind of dumbing it down for an audience who I think don't understand. I'm always coming in with the idea of, okay, let's talk about this from a more complex point of view than just surface level. But I don't think that necessarily excludes anyone. I think that kind of thinking of your audience as being intelligent people who can understand those more complex issues and will dig into a 40-minute essay means that I do attract kind of different people, and that's actually probably a strength in what I produce.
Thank you, Rowan. That was a really, really good story right there at the end, and shows the power of what you both do. So thank you very, very much on behalf of I Am Remarkable, on behalf of our audience today. You shared a lot. It was thoughtful, insightful, emotional. So really, really big thank you to the two of you. And thank you to all of those who tuned in today. And with that, I will wish all of you a very good day and a very good rest of the week. Thank you.